Hello everyone and welcome to Tasmania. Now today we are talking about the case of April Jones. It's a very heartbreaking case. It's about a child who was abducted and murdered here in Wales. So I put a disclaimer in here of things that will be covered. If you think you'll find this video triggering, please don't watch it. Look after yourself. It is a hard one. Machynlleth is the kind of market town where lanes slope down to clock towers and neighbours are more like extended family. On the 4th of April 2007, April Sue-Lyn Jones was born into that community to loving parents Paul and Coral Jones. Born nearly 2 months early, she spent her first few weeks in intensive care. And later, at just 3 years old, April was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. Even with this diagnosis, April was thriving. She was described by family as bright, playful, and stubborn in a way that made grown-ups smile. And she was determined. She loved swimming and outdoor play, and often rode her pink bicycle around the quiet Brynagog estate near the family home. It was a weekday evening. April had returned from a swimming lesson. Her parents were at a school parents' evening. Later that night, she asked to play outside with some friends, and was allowed to, as children in the estate often did. At 7 p.m, April goes out to play, but just a short while later, that ordinary night changes forever. Coral sends her son out to fetch April, but soon after he comes back home hysterical. He says that someone has taken April. So Coral, she goes out to April's friend and asks her what happened to April. And her friend says that April got into a grey car with a man and they drove off. Coral immediately called 999. While waiting for police, Coral began searching for her daughter anywhere she could think, even looking in bins and asking her friend to drive her around. She was frantic, like any parent would be when their child is missing. Police arrived quickly and began speaking to April's parents, and most importantly, April's friend who saw where she'd gone. Shortly after speaking to April's friend, Dyfed-Powys Police upgraded the investigation to a critical incident and launched the biggest search operation in British policing history. By 10:30 p.m, Dyfed-Powys Police issue a statement saying, "We are increasingly concerned for a missing 5-year-old, April, who was last seen playing on her bike in Machynlleth at about 7:30 p.m. April was seen getting into a light-coloured van as it drove off." The response was immediate and enormous. Locals, volunteers and specialist teams spread out across farmland, rivers and woodlands. Dyfed-Powys Police deployed helicopters, dogs, divers, search and rescue, while volunteers joined the grid searches. Within days, the operation involved hundreds of officers and thousands of offers of help. Police logged thousands of public calls and messages. The scale was huge, with an average of around 135 officers working each day in the operation. For many weeks, the town was sleepless. Rivers and drains, cellars and barns were checked, and land was dragged, and every tip was followed. 2 days after April's disappearance, a child rescue alert was issued for her, and this was the first time the alert system was used since its induction. It's similar to that of an Amber Alert in America. The alert was distributed through various channels to help in the search. In the early hours of the 2nd of October, a witness had seen a man carrying 2 black bin bags along the River Dyfi. With that, and finding a match to the grey van, less than a day after April disappeared, police arrested a 46-year-old local man, Mark Leonard Bridger, who matched witness descriptions and who owned a left-hand drive Land Rover Discovery. At 3:30 p.m., he was detained while walking a couple miles outside of Machynlleth. Bridger had a varied work history, reported as working at times as a lifeguard, abattoir worker and other roles, and had a complex private life. He was arrested on the 2nd of October 2012 and charged just a few days later with abduction, murder, and attempting to pervert the course of justice. Police formally designated the inquiry a murder investigation on the 5th of October 2012.
To charge Mark Bridger with the murder of April Jones, and that it is in the public interest to do so. I have also concluded that there is sufficient evidence to charge the defendant with attempting to pervert the course of justice and child abduction.
Although this changed the dynamics of the search, this would not stop people from trying to find April. And for the public, this arrest and charge was a devastating blow. Community leaders reflect on the change of mood once it was announced a murder investigation, but say people were still clinging to hope that April could still be found alive. When officers searched Bridger's rented cottage, they found evidence that would become central to the Crown's case. Blood traces were located in several parts of the property, under a carpet, on the floor and in the bathroom, and forensic testing later reported a match to April's DNA. Investigators discovered ash and charred fragments from a recently lit fire in the log burner. Forensic and anthropological examination identified tiny bone fragments, some of which experts described in court as consistent with human skull fragments of a young individual. Burnt so heavily, some fragments could not be DNA typed. Reporters and court summaries record that around a dozen plus tiny fragments were recovered from the area. Now, I do need to give a warning before this next bit. I do discuss what was found on Bridger's laptop. It includes child abuse, sexual abuse of children, a pregnant child, indecent pictures, and anything you could think of, it's probably there. I have a whole list of things here, so I'm just going to read them out. Police found a library of child sex abuse images on his computer, including Facebook pictures of young local girls, including that of April and her sister. When he was asked why he had the pictures of April's 16-year-old sister, Bridger told police that he thought she was beautiful and an up-and-coming local model. It does get worse. An extensive collection of child material was found on his computer. And during the trial, it emerged that just hours before abducting April, he had viewed a cartoon image of a girl that was bound and being sexually assaulted by an adult. Search terms he had allegedly typed into his computer included naked 5-year-old girls and pictures of naked virgin teens. The jury was shown a picture of a pregnant 8-year-old girl, which he told police he found astonishing and interesting. When interviewed by police, Bridger claimed he had looked at some of these images to understand the development of his own daughter and to help her become a model. It was also revealed that a video was found paused at the point of a rape and murder scene from the remake of the 70s slasher film, The Last House on the Left. He had recorded the same scene twice, but nothing more of the film. Also on his computer were images of murder victims, including 10-year-old Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman, who were murdered by their school caretaker in Cambridgeshire. Detective Superintendent Andy John, who was the senior investigating officer, said, "For me, the computer evidence points towards an individual who is evil, manipulative, and has premeditated this. The unhealthy interest he has in indecent images of children is a clear indicated that this individual was going to commit something as horrific as he did. During the trial, the jury asked for the images in the dock to be turned off because they were worried that Bridger would enjoy seeing them again. These physical traces, the blood matching April's DNA and the burnt bone fragments in the stove, became the evidential backbone that persuaded the Crown there had been a fatal assault and a subsequent attempt to destroy evidence. Across police interviews and pre-trial hearings, Bridger's accounts shifted. Early on, he pleaded not guilty to murder, but later, at a hearing in January 2013, he told the court he was probably responsible for April's death, while continuing to give contradictory explanations about what happened that night. Among the narratives that he offered, he claimed to be heavily intoxicated and may have struck April with his vehicle, or that he panicked and could not recall a disposal of any body. The prosecution argued that those versions were inconsistent and that the physical evidence pointed towards a deliberate and criminal course of events. On the 30th of May 2013, the jury returned guilty verdicts. Mark Bridger was found guilty of abduction, murder, and perverting the course of justice. In sentencing, the judge, Mr. Justice Griffiths Williams, described the offender in some severe terms, calling him a pathological liar and a paedophile in his sentencing remarks, saying, "There is no doubt in my mind that you are a paedophile who has for some time harbored sexual and morbid fantasies about young girls, storing on your laptop not only images of prepubescent and pubescent girls, but foul pornography of the gross sexual abuse of young children," and concluded that the seriousness of the offence justified a whole life order. The judge fixed that Bridger should never be released. Some jurors even wept as April's mother's victim impact statement was read out, in which she said she would live with the guilt of letting her daughter go out to play that night for the rest of her life. Although investigators recovered multiple tiny bone fragments and April's blood was found within the cottage, April's full remains were never recovered. Reports in the weeks and months after the trial repeatedly note that only fragments and traces were found, and that the family never regained their daughter's body in full. That absence has been a central, enduring source of anguish for the family and town. Police statements have indicated they believe the remains had been scattered or otherwise destroyed, and a specialist reactive team remained available for new information after the large search was wound down. Shortly after Bridger was convicted, it emerged that while on remand at HMP Manchester, he told a prison priest he disposed of April's body in a river, thought to be the Dovey, close to where he was arrested, although officers think he's lying, and they believe April is scattered around the countryside. The formal large-scale search was wound down in April 2013. Police confirmed the search operation was completed in late April, with a smaller reactive team kept alive for new information. April's funeral took place later that year. On the 26th of September 2013, a public service at St. Peter's Church in Machynlleth drew hundreds of mourners. The town shut down and paid its respects.
Lord, someone we have loved has died, someone special to us, precious, irreplaceable. We know that there are no words we can say at this moment to express what we are feeling. Praise for his name's sake. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil.
In 2014, the Welsh Government purchased Bridger's cottage in Caynws and arranged for it to be demolished. The demolition was carried out in November 2014, and the family watched as the building was destroyed. A memorial garden was created on the site, so the location would be a place of remembrance rather than notoriety. Bridger lodged an application to challenge the whole life tariff, but subsequently dropped his appeal against the whole life sentence in January 2014. He had also sought legal avenues to challenge aspects of his case, but ultimately the whole life order remained in place. Throughout and after the trial, Bridger refused to say definitively what he had done with April's body. His silence and changing accounts continue to deny the family closure. Bridger was actually attacked this year in July by another inmate at HMP Wakefield. He only suffered grazes to his hands and was treated on site. April's half-sister, Hazel Jones, spoke out after the attack, saying, "Bridger deserves everything he's getting," and I can't help but to agree. This was the second time he was attacked behind bars. In July 2013, Bridger was slashed with a knife fashioned out of a razor as he walked along a gangway at HMP Wakefield by fellow inmate and convicted murderer Juvenal Ferreira. The indecent images found on Bridger's laptop prompted national discussions, and campaigning prompted by April's parents and others about how search engines and platforms should handle searches that produce child sex abuse images. In late 2013, following pressure and campaigning connected to the case, major search engines adjusted filters and policies to make it harder for explicit child abuse imagery to appear in image search results and to respond to public concerns about ease of access. The case became one focal point in debates over internet safety and the policing of indecent images of children. The legal facts are stark. The human cost is deeper. April's parents, Coral and Paul, and her siblings have lived in the public eye and carried that grief privately. The town of Machynlleth, where school children, shopkeepers, hundreds upon hundreds of volunteers who combed fields, hedges and rivers, continues to mark the loss of April. The demolition of the cottage and the memorial were gestures both practical and symbolic. A community refusing to keep a shrine to violence and trying to provide a quieter site for memory. The hardest factual gap, and one that will remain unless Bridger or new evidence reveals otherwise, is the exact location of April's full remains and the precise account of what he did after the abduction. Bridger's silence, his changing accounts, and the partial destruction of physical evidence has left the family without full forensic closure. I don't want to end the video on such a sad note. It's hard not to, but I do want to mention this. In 2018, April's dad, Paul, contracted the brain condition encephalitis, and he suffered memory loss. He had to learn of his daughter's death for a second time after he was diagnosed. 6 years after the death of his daughter, he asked what happened to April, and Coral had to tell him that she was no longer with them because she had been murdered. And following the news, he broke down. Paul would pass away unexpectedly on May 13th, 2025, aged 56, almost 13 years after April's death. April's story is one that shook an entire nation, a heartbreaking reminder of why we must protect our children and look out for one another. Though justice was served, her memory continues to live on through the community that came together in her name. If this story has affected you in any way, please know you are not alone. I will include helplines and support resources here in the video and in the description below. Don't hesitate to reach out if you need to talk to someone. Thank you for watching and for taking the time to hear about April. If you found this video informative, please give it a like. Subscribe for more true crime and awareness stories. and share it to help keep her memory alive. I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves and each other.